Welcome back to the For a Purpose podcast. My name is Jayden Boyce. Alongside me, as always, is Jon Hinzman. And an interesting guest we have on today. I just found out you are related to my grandpa. Actually, I knew nothing about you my entire life, but just found out you were best friends with my grandpa. And Joe Draxler is on the podcast today. How are you doing today?
What's that?
Sorry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, thank you.
This was kind of John. John and you have had a relationship, I guess, and this is John was like, "Hey, let's get him on. He has a great story. Let's have him on." So, John,
Yeah. So Joe and I met, years ago. I can't remember how many years ago it was now.
Oh, I have no idea, John.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes.
And sometimes you meet people kind of in your most challenging moments, and I think it was one of my challenging moments where Joe appeared, and it was kind of a light for me. And we started chit chatting and sending some text messages and having some breakfasts. And so Joe's been one of the guys that I can kind of turn to when I challenge myself or get into moments, and it's really been beneficial. So it's great to have you on, Joe.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Spring chicken, is what we call you. So we just want to know about you. So why don't you give us where you grew up? Kind of what your family was like when you first stepped foot on this earth, and God blessed us with you, and where that all began.
Sure. So my great grandpa actually came from Germany in 1903, and he had the first 40 acres and worked at the local lumber yard. And he did that for 3 years, cleaned up or cleared their farm, and then they built the barn, the first two-story barn, in 1906. Then my grandpa took over. When my grandpa was 42, he enlisted in World War II and was gone for 3.5 years. And so then my dad, who was only 20 at the time, farmed with grandma, and until grandpa came back, of course. So in 1960, dad bought the farm from grandpa. And then in 1972, I started farming with dad, and I bought him out in 1980. We were there were 7 of us kids in the family, German Catholics. I went to 8 years of Catholic parochial school, and that was really interesting. Our 8th grade class only had 10 boys in it. And so when I got to the public school, I was a hayseed farm kid, literally. So the first football game I ever saw as a freshman, I played in. Dad never watched it on TV. We didn't go to games. We didn't watch games. We didn't do any of that. The first wrestling match I ever saw, I wrestled in as a freshman. So I did 4 years of school in Glenwood City, and then I went to River Falls. I would say we were a pretty conservative family. You were pretty self-sufficient. You didn't have a lot of money, but you had everything you needed. And the big treat for us we always laugh about now is we go to mass on Sunday morning, and then we'd stop at the drugstore and get a quart of ice cream to share with the family, at noon. So then I went to River Falls, and then 2 years later, Charlotte and I got married. She had actually gone to nursing school in St. Paul. And so we got married and we started farming. It was kind of interesting because from about 16, 17 years of age on, beer drinking was a big thing. And 18-year-old beer bars. And so it was a big thing of culture. I got to be a really good beer drinker. Yeah, I remember I was 28 years old, and Charlotte started going to a Bible study. And I went with her one night, And I told her, we'll get a babysitter, we'll go to the Bible study, we'll stay for an hour, then we'll find some place to go eat. And the Bible study started at 8 o'clock because everybody did it after chores were done. And I don't think we got out of there until 10 or 11 o'clock that night because I kept asking questions. And I had never opened a Bible at 28 years of age. And every time I asked the old German pastor a question, he'd open up the Bible and show me the answer. And I got really, really intrigued with that. So we started going to Bible studies. Came home from my brother's wedding about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had drank a lot of beer, like we always did. And about 4:30, we were up milking cows, and I said to Charles, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I didn't have the money to drink beer, and um, it wasn't doing me any good. I had just bought the farm. Um, we had 5 kids and 2 foster kids. We had several foster kids when we were younger, and so I quit drinking beer, and I haven't drank beer since I was 28 years old. Um, it was the right thing for me to do, and we helped build a church up by Forest, and got very involved in different types of things with the church, and then we actually moved. There was 3 years or so. I call it the dark ages. We had a falling apart up at that church, and I left, and I didn't go to church. I didn't associate with people. I became a really good hermit. Um, and one day, one of the doctor I was seeing in Glenwood invited me to go to a church in Menominee, the Alliance Church. And so we went to the Alliance Church and kind of rehooked. And then we were coming into Menominee one morning, and we were late because chores didn't go like they were supposed to. And we were coming by the Menominee Theater, and there's all these cars. And I said to Cheryl, what's going on here? And she says, well, there's a new church here. And we were already late for Alliance on the other end of town. And so I said, well, let's check this out. So we went in, and a lot of people that were there from Glenwood that we knew, and we stayed. So then they moved to the mall, and they were doing the Advent conspiracy, and they showed a video of living water, and I was completely oblivious to the water crisis. I just assumed that everybody had water, and we watched the video, and I said to Charles, I got to do that. And she said, well, not without me. So we signed up for the trip, and they were doing some classes because this is the first trip that Cedar Brook had ever taken on a mission trip. So we did 2-3 classes, and one day Pastor Remy came to me and he said, I want you to lead the trip. And I said, nope, not going to do it. I said, I've been on the front line. I've got shot. I've got wounded. I said, I'm not going to do it. And he says, you need to think about it. He says, and I said, so give me one really good reason why I should be the leader. And he said, well, I prayed about it. And I said, well, that's cheating. Plain and simple. Okay. So we led the trip. And when I signed up, I was completely convinced it was a one and done thing. I'm going to do this once, I can check it off, and I can move on. And God really met me on that trip. And I thought I had a relationship that was really close with him, but he took me to another level. And so then we did the second trip and the third trip, and then they called, Living Water called, and asked if I would go to Haiti. And I had told God years ago it was always easy for me to give to people and give to things. Um, but I always told God, I said, why can't you use me? Because we had good friends that were missionaries in Mexico. I said, why can't you use me? And I said, but I don't want to go to Haiti and I don't want to go to Africa. So, of course, here I go to Haiti. Okay. So, over the years, I ended up doing 27 trips. 10 or 11 of them were to Haiti. And being able to give clean water to people is a fabulous thing. Taking people on the trips, I took my kids, I took grandkids, I took people from Canada and all over the United States. Being able to take people is the second best part. The third, probably the most important part, is um, showing Jesus to those people in those foreign countries. So the mission trips led to a lot of different things, a lot of little different ministries. And we had associations with people in Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Haiti. And it kept opening up doors. And we built a house for a couple in Charlotte, and I built a house for a couple in El Salvador. We financed it, and little doors would kept opening here and there. And there again, you think you're gonna build this house and you're gonna be done, okay? And it's not what God had planned at all. So, um, my daughter was in Honduras one day, and she called me, and she said, she goes, "Dad, I was at church, and God told me to build a house for this lady sitting in front of me." I said, "Okay." I said, "Did you talk to her?" "Yeah, she lost her husband. She had 2 or 3 little kids." But she says, "I know I'm supposed to build that house for her." I said, "Okay." She goes, "Will you help me?" And I said, "Nope. He didn't tell me. He told you." And it was a good lesson for her, but it was also a good lesson for me to listen. What does God want me to do? And um, so she built the house, and of course, it went fine. We took our last trip to El Salvador in 2020, and we got back on March 8th,
Oh, jeez.
and it closed on March 15th. So I was glad we got home.
Yeah, no, for real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have probably bought a pickup or walked. You know.
So you got a lot of information there, man. We got to unpack a little bit of this. So I want to go back to your upbringing. So you're on the family farm through 8th grade,
Yeah.
and then you hit high school in Glenwood City.
Yeah.
What was your class size? You were at a farm school, I'm assuming, right, with 10?
Yeah. So in high school, we had about 70 kids in our class.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did very well academically, and I did really well in football. I got all conference and all whatever.
Mhm.
All right. Wrestling wasn't my gig, and it was kind of interesting. The defensive football coach, he and I didn't see eye to eye very well, and one Monday night we had lost the game. I was center. We'd lost the game, and he lined up across from me, and he said, he called me all the names, and he said, "You're just no good." And he says he had no pads on, and I was fully padded. And he goes, "Hit me." I said, "I ain't doing that." And he says, "Come on." And he was a college football player, and so we lined up, and I saw him turn his foot, and I knew what he was going to do, and I mowed him right over. He he came up swinging,
Hmm.
and of course I got in trouble. And he ended up to be the wrestling coach, so I quit wrestling, which is really sad, you know.
Mhm.
So academically, I did okay. I was on National Honor Society. I was, you know, um, high school was a lot of fun.
I think a crazy part is you played your first football game you played was the first one you ever watched. I don't think anyone listening here has ever really done a sport like football or wrestling without ever watching it before they've done it. Explain what that first game must have been like.
So, you know, I had no clue. Okay, so I'm a farm kid. When I was a little kid, I was a runt. I was a little bitty kid. Okay, and I just wanted to be home. I just wanted to be on the farm. They said I cried the first whole day of kindergarten because I just wanted to be home. All right. So by high school, I was getting pretty good size, and of course I'm a farm kid, so I'm pretty well fit. And so the first day of practice, it was like, um, is this all you got? You know, I mean, it was like, so my senior year, the summer before, of course, we baled hay and pitched calf pens and everything else. And I wore wrist weights and ankle weights. And, we milk cows. And then I'd run 2 miles to town and back. And um, I was pretty fit. And it was a different sport back then. Um, but walking into that very first game and not having a clue of really what you're supposed to do, other than my job was to get him. You know,
Mhm.
as I look back on it, it would be a whole lot easier if I had watched some games.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. I use a parallel to that. When I was in my late 30s, I went to ground school to fly an airplane, and I went to Stout and did the ground school, and I studied the book in and out, and I went and took the test. I only got one wrong on the test, and then I got in an airplane. I was like, gosh, I wish I'd have done this for about an hour, and it would just made sense, you know.
Yep.
Um, so
So your grandpa came over in 1902,
three,
three,
yep.
and 40 acres started with in Glenwood City. What's your farm up to now? Where are you guys at?
So we milk about 650 cows. We got another 600 head of young stock, and we run about 2,200 acres of cropland. And so Grandpa started with 12 cows and probably some pigs and chickens and
Mhm.
horses, literally, you know.
Yeah. And how many of your kids are still on the farm yet?
Yep. So I got two boys on the farm. The five kids were four boys and a girl, and two of the boys are in finance in the Twin Cities, and my daughter's in finance, and then the two boys, the middle boys, are on the farm. An interesting concept with our farm is so I got to farm with Dad and Grandpa from 72 until 92. Grandpa died.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dad got leukemia a couple years later. And so 96, Dad died. And Dad and I never had a good argument. We just never had a good argument. And then the two boys came back. I made them go do something after high school. They came back in 2000. And um, we've never had an argument, and I just think it's phenomenal that we get along as good as we do.
Or yeah, I was gonna go going back to when you were talking about, you said you took 27 trips and stuff. Obviously all those trips were meaningful probably on their different ways, but there one that kind of stood out to you above the other ones that you went on?
Yeah, so I was in Haiti, and we were on a pump repair trip, and there was 5 or 6 of us, and I'm not even sure where the well, I think the other guys were southern Wisconsin, and we drove out. Some of the teams didn't want to go very far, and I said, I don't care where I go. All right, if they got a pump to fix, I'll go fix it. The one the one that we did was 3.5 hours driving. Of course, it's like driving cross country, you know. And we went by a voodoo um princess place. You could always tell by the flags, and we just drove by it, and 3 of the tires blew on the 2 trucks.
Hmm.
And of course, we only had 2 spares, so we put 2 of them on, sent somebody back to town with tires to get it fixed, and we walked up to the place where we were going to drill and or fix the pump. And we pulled up to this pump, and it's alongside the road, and the brush had grown up 10, 12 feet high all the way around it. And I said to the other guy, I said, I don't want to fix this pump. And he goes, why not? I said, there's nobody here. I said, we're just in the middle of nowhere fixing a pump. I said, I feel like the Culligan man.
Yeah.
And he laughed at me, and he goes, yeah, it'll be okay. So we had to cut the brush to get at the pump, and we start pulling the pump, and all of a sudden these kids start showing up. Well, what I didn't know is the village was maybe 100 yards off the cliff, and they couldn't get a drill rig down there, so they drilled it up on top of the hill. So we pulled the pump, and we're throwing footballs with the kids and, you know, goofing around. And we had a pump in there, electric pump, and we were flushing it. And there was a guy standing a ways away. He'd been standing there watching. You could tell he was a very hard-working man. He was very fit, 40s. He had a hand on him like a baseball mitt. And I got the interpreter, and I said, we got to go talk to him. And we walked over, and he burst into tears. Now, this is all of 10, 12 years ago, and it's still very emotional when I think about it. He burst into tears, and so we were talking back and forth, and I said, what's going on? And he said, I've been praying for 7 years for somebody to come and fix our pump. He said, we have to walk 7 kilometers down the mountain, get a bucket of water, and bring it back. And he said, that's what our day is going and getting a bucket of water and bringing it back. And, it's absolutely life-changing. And he said, why would you do this? And I said, what? And he goes, why would you spend your time and your money to come down here to help me? And that is what life is all about. If you don't have the time to help those other people, then you're missing it.
That's that's an incredible story. And I mean, John, we've been on multiple trips and we've helped people, and all after it, I mean, you just feel like the best person ever, like helping people out and stuff, and it just feels so good. That trip to Iowa we took is always one I think about. Where in Iowa did we go that one time?
Oh gosh, we were just north of Iowa City because the Direcco came through, and so we went down there and volunteered, and got put on a farm with some people we had no idea, but the relationships we made were pretty cool.
Yeah, it was an incredible trip. And yeah, I mean, that's what, for a purpose is, I'd say, is, like trying to like see like all these people. There's so many people out in the world that just need help. And, I mean, going on 27 different trips and helping people out, that is absolutely incredible.
Well, and it's very humbling that, first of all, that God picked me to do that. Okay. Second of all, is that I could do it. You take off for 8, 9, 10 days is usually what one of those trips would be, and I could shuffle things and make it work. One winter, I went to Haiti 4 times. Um, I'd go down, maybe be home a few days, and they'd call and say, "Can you take another team?" And away I go. Uh, Looking back on it, it's like, gosh, I hope he doesn't ask me to do that again. Um,
It's interesting that you never wanted to go to Haiti. You prayed like, "Don't send me
right,
to Haiti."
right.
What inside of you, or was that God saying, "Hey, I'm gonna keep putting you back there"? What was that piece? What happened there?
So they called and said whoever was supposed to take this team couldn't go. He said, "We got a spot. Can you go?" And I said, "It just was yes." And I remember going and we went into Cap Haitian, the northern side of Haiti, and um, I didn't know anybody else on the team, and I was just, what am I doing, you know? But I knew I was supposed to go. Um, when we landed, there was 6 airplanes on the sides of the runway that had crashed, and they just don't have the infrastructure, the means, or the way of even moving them away. And it was it was so eye opening. We were coming out one time, and of course, going in and out of Haiti is to catch a plane. You just don't catch a plane. They're full, and we get to the airport on a Monday morning, and it's just a tin shed at that time. They actually have a little terminal there now, and we wait our turn to get up to the front, and the girl goes, "Oh, you don't go today. Maybe the hurricane was." We were there during a hurricane, and they said those people couldn't fly, so they're going to go today, and maybe you can go tomorrow, maybe you can go the next day. So there was a half a dozen of us. Um, we had a pickup, and we had money, and we spent the day finding um, drinkable water and something to eat.
Hmm.
And we found an empty house from a pastor, and so we had to fix the pump so we would have water in the house and go to town, do this, do that. I mean, you don't just go to the hardware store. And we sent 2 of the guys. We said, go find us something to eat. Okay. They were gone 2, 3 hours, and they came back and they had rice and chicken gizzards. And 2 of the guys said, I can't eat that. I said, okay. I said, maybe we'll get on the plane tomorrow, and maybe you can have a cracker on the plane. I don't know. This is what you got, dude. You know?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't eat it. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you know,
We talk sports. Jayden and I do quite a bit. Um, and this is almost more uh, comparable to sports than a lot of things because you have your team.
mm-hmm.
You form your team. And, you talk about when you were asked to lead, kind of like being, quarterback, point guard, whatever you want to point as a team. How do you go about then selecting your team and finding those people to be part of your team? Because, the adversity you face, you know, and Jayden talked about some of the mission trips that we've been on. I've gone to Honduras once. There's a lot of adversity that can happen before you even step foot on a plane, trying to distract you from your mission. But so, comparable to sports, but let's talk about your team a little bit. How do you identify your team, and how do you get everybody buying in and saying, okay, here's what we're going to happen, and here's what we're going to try to do. But there's going to be uh, encounters with uh, the devil or evil one on our way there.
Yeah. Yeah. Couple of different things that happened. One time I was supposed to meet a team, and I flew in on Saturday, and somebody picked me up and took me to this house, a compound, and the other team got caught in a snowstorm. They couldn't get through Chicago, so they were going to come in the next day. I spent the night alone in the house in Haiti with voodoo drums playing, or not very far from me. And
it was one of those things. What am I doing? You know, but and we have this every day, but in every day of our life, we have this. What are we doing? But I knew I was okay. God had sent me here. God had me here. I wasn't doing my plan. I was doing His plan. Um, Another team came in, and um, another one of the guys had been there a few times, and um, the guy from Living Water that met with us, he said, "Well, Joel's going to be your leader," and he didn't like that idea. He didn't like it at all. And I said, "Oh, that's okay. You know, well, I've been here. I've done that. I know what I'm doing." I said, "Okay, that's all right. You can." So we were out pulling a pump, and we were in 10, 15 minutes, and I had gone back and sat on the tailgate of the pickup, and let him go. Okay. And the guy next to me nudges me, and he goes, "You see what's going on?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I do." He says, "You better." I said, "Yeah, I better go talk to him because they were pulling it. If they drop it, they ruin the well.
Right.
There's no chance of fixing it now. Okay. Unless you can fish that pipe out of there." And I walked over and I said, "Hey, just a FYI," I said, "just," he goes, "Oh my gosh." He goes, "I'm sorry." And I said, "It's okay. We didn't drop it." Okay. So we're working away. And about 20 minutes later, it's another one comes up, and I walked over, and he saw me walking towards him, and he goes, and he looked at me, and he looked at the pump, and he looked back and forth a couple times, and finally goes, "Oh my gosh." I I said, "Yeah, but we didn't drop it."
Yeah.
Okay. And he backs up and he holds his hands up and he goes, "I need to get out of here." I said, "No, you don't. This is the way we learn." Well, we ended up being really good friends the rest of the trip, you know. Um, I had a team one time from Michigan, had a wide receiver, played for Michigan State. He was about 12'7" or something, you know. And we were pulling 20-foot steel pipe. It was really fun to have him. I don't know how tall he was, but he could reach up,
Yeah.
you know, almost halfway up the pipe. And he was kind of a quiet kid. And he said, "I called it severe clear. It's 100 degrees. There's not a breeze, and it's perfectly clear out." Okay. And he goes, he called me prayer man. He goes, "Hey, prayer man, we could sure use some clouds." And I said, "Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we pray?" And he goes, "You would pray for the weather?" I said, "Yeah, I'd pray for the weather." I said, "I farm. I learned to pray for the weather."
Yeah.
Okay. So we prayed and we went to another pump, and it was a tent city where the people from Port-au-Prince had gone after the earthquake because they were afraid of being in town. Just thousands of people and no water. And we're pulling this pump, and it's getting dark, and all of a sudden it started to rain a little bit. Clouds are getting darker and darker, and we're getting lightning and thunder. And I said, "You guys want to quit?" And they go, "No, no, no. These people need water. We got to get this fixed." And I said, "Well, pulling pipes in a thunderstorm is probably not the coolest thing to do." No. Yeah. They go, "No, no, no. We need to get this fixed." And that young kid turned and looked at me, and he goes, "So you prayed for clouds and you prayed for a little rain to cool it down. Just how much rain are we going to get?" So that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like when you think about that, how like we have all these supplies here, we never have to worry about water. We never have to worry about walking 7 kilometers for water. It's just like wild to think about that people do go through that. That's amazing. You guys do that. Good question for you. A lot of people always, trying to go out of the country for mission trips, obviously and stuff. What do you think about though? Saying obviously like love your neighbor and stuff. There's a lot of stuff not going great in America all the time too. What do you think about people staying around here locally too and also helping people out?
Absolutely. And That's one of the things that I know that like Cedarbrook is trying to do is not everybody wants to go to Haiti. Okay. Not everybody wants to cross the water. I know they're doing, building homes in Mexico. Um, you can go to New Orleans after the hurricane. You can go across the street sometimes and help your neighbor.
Right.
When I was a kid, our neighbor had 6 cows, no electricity, horses, milk by hand, lanterns. And I used to go down there on Saturday mornings, especially in the wintertime, and just help them for 2, 3 hours. And um, everybody said, "Why do you do that?" And it's like, I don't know. I just had to do it, you know. Um, so my wife has a really interesting concept. She says her goal in life is to help somebody with something, little something, every single day. And I mean, that's a mission trip.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing about milking cows is it's usually two times a day job, 7 days a week. And I'm sure you spend a lot of your time milking cows by hand, right?
Yeah.
And so, that process alone of just growing up through that and then going and helping neighbors well because you still had your own chores get done. So
Yeah.
getting all that piece done and stuff. And so, Joe, you share a lot about your faith and your belief. And um, how do you know when God is talking to you in that process? How do you know it's not just a message in your head or something that you've kind of formed yourself into believing? How do you know when He's saying, "Hey, here you go"?
So I call it nudges. Um, some people call them shoulder taps. Um, I was milking cows one morning with a hired man, and Charlotte would go over to the calf barns and the heifer barns and work over there. And about the time we got about half done milking, then she'd come and milk, and with the hired man, and I'd go start doing other chores. And we'd started milking that morning, and I just got this little nudge that I was supposed to buy a van for this missionary friends in Mexico. I was like, man, that had to have been a pizza, something I ate last night, because that's not cool. Okay. And I just kept getting the thought. And Charlotte comes up from the calf barn and she goes, Joe, I think we're supposed to buy them a van. It's like, oh, great. So one of the things Charlotte and I have is a lot of times we'll both get the same thought. Okay. A lot of times it's just a thought. I've learned over the years that if it's a positive thought, I need to act on it. Okay. If it's not a self-centered thought, if it's not anything but a positive thought, usually helping somebody else or calling somebody, then I need to do that. And I know God speaks to us in a lot of different ways. One time I told him, I said, send me a Post-it note or something, so this isn't just me. But 2-3 days and it's still kind of intense on me. I gotta act on it.
Okay. Yeah.
As I look down, I already looked down. It's like, oh my goodness, 36 minutes already through this podcast. I don't want to shift the conversation at all, but I think I might have to a little bit. We have had one other grandfather on the podcast, but his grandchildren were like 2, 3 years old and stuff. You've watched your children play sports, and you've also watched your grandchildren play sports.
19.
19 grandchildren, ladies and gentlemen. Is there a big difference in watching it from your kids and to your grandchildren?
So I love watching my kids play sports, and a couple of them were really good. One of them actually went to state, got first place at state football. Wrestling, I've loved wrestling. Okay, and I thought it would kind of calm down a little bit as I got older, and it hasn't.
No, not at all.
No, no, it hasn't. You know, I squirm so bad in the bleachers when one of the grandkids is wrestling. Uh, uh, and I'm glad that it does. You know, I always said it's kind of like deer hunting. When when I told Charlotte deer hunt, she's really good, and I said
She's good with a gun.
she's very good with a gun. She's very very good with a gun. She goes, but I pull it up and I start to shake, and I said, when that goes away, then you need to quit.
Yeah.
You absolutely need to quit. So I don't think it lightens up.
Mhm.
You know, I it hasn't for me anyway. So
Wait, so where do then, I'm guessing not all your grandkids go to the same school. So what's different schools do they all go to?
so um, the two boys in the cities. One of my grandsons is wrestling for Hopkins this year
Yeah.
as an eighth grader.
Oh.
He's on varsity at
Cool.
106. Um, uh, we had one wrestler in Glenwood. We only had 4 grandsons. We had a lot of girls.
Yeah.
We went to a volleyball match in Eau Claire a couple weeks ago. So that's the other thing that's really, we're very fortunate because everybody's within an hour. So
Either way, you're kind of covered.
yeah.
Jayden talked about the sports piece. Obviously, your family has worked extremely hard
Mhm.
to get to where you're at. How do you try to influence your grandkids now on that piece? I mean, is your relationship that close that they know, like, man, Grandpa Joe he's getting after it yet? And how do you try to influence that? And because we talked about that resiliency, you talked about the gentleman overseas that had a huge impact on you, the walk and the years and that stuff. And I'm a believer in resilience in adversity, I should say, is a good thing. The challenge is a good thing. But how do you try to impact your kids and your grandkids, I guess more so now, is in today's society where they might see, like, I can just have it. I don't have to work that hard for it.
Yeah. So 2 of the boys were at the farm today. They were both on spring break, and 2 of the grandsons.
Okay.
And I guess you lead by example. You can't just point them in that direction.
Right.
And it was so heartwarming to me today watching them guys just get after it. And I think my grandpa and my dad were very giving people, and I ended up to be very giving, and I see it in my kids, and it's the same way with hard work. I mean, for grandpa to enlist in World War II at age 42,
Crazy.
just phenomenal. Okay. And I like to work. I mean, I'll be 72 here shortly, and farming's a hobby for me. And yeah, I get some really long days, but I like it. I don't know what else I'd rather do. I don't want to sit in the house and watch TV. So I think just leading by example, and you instill that in them.
Are there then like summers then the grandkids come back and work a lot at the farm then?
Yeah. So, yep. So, well, we'll have one for sure, and the grandson that's at Gonzaga graduates in May, and he got a job at Roberts as a civil engineer. But he wants to be close to the farm, and we were afraid he was going to settle out in Washington. It's like, that's too far away, man.
Yeah.
But he likes to hunt. He likes to fish. And I know he'll be around.
Yeah, I forget how many grandchildren are there of us, but it's around 19-ish too. And all the summers, us grandkids, most of us would come back, try to work on the farm, save up money for like the county fairs and stuff.
Yep.
That was always our goal and stuff. But yeah, I mean, John, you probably could not have soft hands, but I did work on the farm a few times. One time though, I don't even know if my grandparents.
How many
know
cows
this.
have you milked by hand?
By hand, not a ton. I would though use a machine though. One time I was going and I was too slow though, and cow crapped all over my hands, and I called it after that. So that was my. I'm not the farmer type, but yeah.
Hey Joe, so one of the questions we always wrap up with is, for purpose. identifying your purpose. I have to believe that God's been in that for you quite a bit. What is your purpose, and when did you identify what your purpose was?
You know, it was about that time when I started. Well, when I first opened my Bible at 28 years of age, it's kind of like going to play football when you've never seen a game,
Mm-hmm.
but very similar. Um, it it just kind of it was a major change in my life. When we got back from that last mission trip, I Charlotte and I didn't feel the need to take another trip. Okay, so we started a nonprofit. Uh, we we have an orphanage in India now with 49 kids. And we just built a church in Hindu country. We have an orphanage in Haiti. We help in these other countries. Um, I heard somebody say one time, if you're not dead, you're not done. And I think you got to get up every day with what am I supposed to do today? Okay, it's not just go out and cut hay or what am I supposed to do for society or for someone else? And I think that's the biggest thing. This orphanage in Haiti is, I haven't been there. Some people have, and that's kind of how the connection started. They needed a well, so they contacted me, and that's how the whole thing took off. Um, so it's like, God, what do you want me to do today? In 2020, we had only about 20 kids there, and he said, he sent me a note one day, and he had a little 2-year-old girl standing out in the street crying because everybody in her house had died of COVID. And so our orphanage grew to 49, so we had to add on to the orphanage. And, I always thought, I can't do that. I can't do that. Yeah, I can. I can't, but he can. God can. Um, I can't build a church in India. No, I can't, but he can. Um, you can put it towards anything, your job or your sports or whatever. Uh, you can.
There was a quote I saw today. I always try to think of something that try to wrap it up with, but the quote was, "Courage is grace under pressure." I remember a while back we talked about truth and grace. And I'm thinking about what you did, the courage, the grace under pressure. You call it nudges. May feel like a little pressure that God's pushing on you. But having the courage to step out and saying, "Okay, God, what can I do today?"
Yeah.
And the impact that you've had on so many people is tremendous, and it just leaves me in awe, and it makes me reflect on, okay, before purpose, what are we doing? And how can we have that impact? And I appreciate you so much. It means a lot for you to come on and share your story, and I'm sure there's more inside that hopefully someday we can learn more about.
Yep. Yep. Well, you go to the weight room every day. Okay.
Yeah.
I lift weights in a different way. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? What am I, I know
Mhm.
you do that too, but
Yeah.
I don't go to the weight room every day. So
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on the show once again. It was fantastic having you learn all about that. As we say every time, every single Wednesday.
Hey,
Look at
one top. I know where
Oh.
you're cutting every. Joe, what's your favorite Bible verse? What's one of your favorite Bible?
So, Jabez, First Chronicles 4:10. Jabez cried out to God, "Oh, that you would bless me, that you would expand my territory, that you would keep your hand upon me, that you would keep me from evil." And it says, and God granted his request. And that's how close he is.
Amen.
Amen to that. That's a great way to end off the podcast. Thank you all for listening. And once again, tune in next week as we keep on these special guests and have a great night.